All right. Welcome to the podcast. I am sitting here with Chuck, um, Matt, and Daryl. Daryl's first time on the podcast. Matt actually hasn't been on for probably years. I think he was on maybe two times before.
A
Um,
couple times, yeah.
yeah, a couple times in the past. So today is, I just found out because I'm an idiot, is January 6th. And so we're going to talk a little bit about January 6th and what that means and get into some of that stuff and how that's going to impact the election, if it's going to impact the election, and kind of go from there. And then after that, we're going to touch on some stuff I wanted to talk about with Israel. Um, and why don't we start? Chuck is the person immediately next to me on screen, so we'll start with you. Chuck,
Fine.
what is your feeling on January 6th? I'm interested to see because you I feel like have a different circle of friends than I do. Um, do you have a different perspective now that the House has released some video of people not acting crazy? And do
Okay.
you feel like that changes anything, you know, that you felt about it before? And how do you feel like moving forward that's going to affect 2024 and anything else you'd like to add?
Well, it was funny today when I logged onto Facebook. It brought up, on this date memories, and of course, my comments on January 6th from 3 years ago came up, and it was interesting going down memory lane. I lost about 10 or 12 friends that day on Facebook because I was very adamant that what was going on at that time was wrong. They were thwarting a constitutionally mandated process. And anyone who knows the reverence with which I hold the Constitution can extrapolate how I feel about a group that is intentionally hamstringing a constitutional process. I don't like Trump, never have. That was not the issue. The issue was that these people were thwarting the Constitution. That's wrong. Now, the liberals and the Democrats, they know uh, how to score points, and yes, they milk that for all they could. I get sick every time I hear somebody comparing it to Pearl Harbor, to 9/11, to, oh my God, come on. There are people who, honest to God, think that Buffalo Head dude was this fucking close from being named dictator of the United States. I swear to God, there are people who believe that. And of course, it's horseshit. There was never going to be any other outcome other than Biden being elected president.
Can
That
I
was
ask you a quick
only ever.
question?
Sure, sure.
And everybody, so when you get a chance to talk, just answer this, but on a scale of 1 to 10, so 10 being the Holocaust and one being it's not a big deal at all, it might even have been a good thing, right? Where do you think 1/6 stands?
If I had to rate it in terms of its awfulness,
Yeah,
3 or 4. I mean, come on. I mean, there were any number of BLM riots that were more calamitous than 1/6. Of course, location and timing are everything. And yeah, it was a big kick in the head to a lot of people to see our Capitol building. I mean, to be literally under siege like that. But again, the I cannot imagine. That's the kind of fucking reaction I want to see if Congress passes an assault weapon ban, not when a turd loses an election. Um, there are times to storm the Bastille. Having Trump not agreeing with the votes is not one of them. He is, God Almighty, I've said it 1,000 times, he is poison. He has the unique ability to make everyone and everything around him worse, friend and foe. He is an absolute poison. Simple. Now, that doesn't mean I disagreed with every policy he broached. Certainly, his judicial picks were to my liking, and on occasion he would say or do something that okay, I like that. He was very big on the right to choose. That is to say, for terminally ill patients to be able to take medical chances if they were, indeed terminally ill. Very, very pleased to have a president who pushed that, but it's not. The trade-off is not worth it. He is pure poison, and 1/6 showed the better did not show the better angels of our nature. It showed the worst we had to offer. Unfortunately, in the last 3 years, people who have tried to capitalize off of that positively and otherwise have also shown the worst angels of our nature. I don't see how in the world someone who went through and marched through the Capitol and yelled a few words should be sentenced to 8 years in prison. I don't see that. That does not add up to me. Yeah, there has to be some culpability. Sure, you can't do shit like that. But yesterday, in his January 6th-ish speech, Biden used the cumulative amount of prison time handed down to the January 6th offenders as an applause line. I'm not sure I like that optics, those optics from a president saying, I've put my political opponents in jail for 740 total months because of this incident. I don't like the way that looks at all. Like everyone else, the Democrats and Republicans have had a chance to cool the temperature since then and to do the right thing and to make sure, or at least help ensure, that a 1/6 is not repeated. And neither side is not interested in that. I think both sides, in their own twisted way, want another similar type incident so they can say, we told you so. Democrats have gotten a lot of mileage out of this in terms of insurrectionists and all that. Nobody wins. It was a terrible
Yeah,
day. The reactions have been terrible.
yeah.
Well, I mean,
So
isn't that kind of the point of politics, though? I
Hmm.
mean, you want to capitalize off your opponent's fuck ups.
Sure. If
I
it,
mean,
it's a big game, yeah. I mean, if we're trying to score points, and if your idea is to outscore the other guy, then yeah, sure. If your idea is
politics is to some degree propaganda.
there's a
Things
lot,
like 9/11 got milked for quite a while. This might sound a little bit controversial. The Holocaust has been milked for 80 years. A tragedy, an absolute tragedy, but
I understand that.
when you have the opportunity to milk something like that to get your way, I would expect a politician that I support to do it.
the only
I
thing
would
I
also
was
I would expect a leader not to do it though, and that's the thing. We are supposed to be electing leaders to these positions, and we are electing hatchet men. Used to be the hatchet men were the ones on the side screaming, milking this, da da da, demagoguing that.
I'm not sure.
We're
I'm
elected.
not sure it has the same effect though. So in other words, yeah, I get the purpose of it and it makes sense logically, like why they do it. But I'm not sure strategically. I mean, I think it's unethical, right? Just as a general matter, but that is sort of irrelevant. But I think
Okay.
strategically,
What are we
strategic.
supposed to do when like a solid third of the electorate probably thinks that what the Capitol writers were doing was justified? I mean, yeah, of course, you're going to kind of have to milk it for what it's worth. Trump is certainly milking it for what it's worth.
Well, Trump is, yeah. I mean, I don't think we should mirror anything Trump does. But I guess what my point is that,
Nothing he does?
well, most of the, not certainly not his behavior. So just getting back to that specific thing, I think it's bad strategy because what happens after a while is people just see it as politicized, and you end up just sort of it ends up echoing throughout the base, and it becomes really persuasive among certain people, and everybody else kind of shuts you out and just kind of assumes that what you're doing is for those purposes. It becomes obvious that it's political, and I think that the better way to do it is, yeah, we do have a third of the country who I totally agree with you are completely lost. Like they're the hardcore Trump base. There's no getting to them. But the answer to that isn't to also do things that or act crazy or over exaggerate or, and I'm not saying necessarily with 1/6 my personal opinion is if I were to rate the how bad it would be a little bit higher, probably more like a 6 or 7 rather than a 3 or 4. I see it a little bit worse, and that's because it was the presidential election and what the intent was, and it was kind of in a tacit support and reinforced by the acting president of the United States. Like all of those factors to me kind of elevated above the Black Lives Matter stuff, which I think was horrendous. Don't get me wrong. I just think it's different and a little
Fiery,
bit
but mostly peaceful.
Right, but so were the MAGA protests.
Yeah.
Right.
This is why I take issue with when the BLM people were like, well, they're mostly peaceful. And I take just as much issue with, the MAGA people saying, well, our protests were mostly peaceful. Like, okay, well, you have on the one hand people who are going around setting businesses on fire, looting Target. I'm sorry, Target did not kill a black guy. If you want to, protest police violence, you want to like set a cop car on fire or something, I can at least understand that.
Right.
But those
No, I agree
were
with that
fucking insane.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, it's like, yeah, and the people storming the Capitol were attacking our democracy.
Right.
So I don't care if mostly
exactly
peaceful or what.
Right.
The big difference between those two things, if you're looking at amount of damage done and impact, is that how many Democrat politicians said, yeah, this was completely justified. Most of them are going, no, we understand, Black Lives Matters has some concerns, but you can't loot. And how much of the GOP politicians are basically saying, oh yeah, we're just going to pardon everybody. And I can understand you going, okay, well, some of these guys walked in and they were there. There's, guys taking a crap on people's desks, people looting, people smashing, 140 police officers assaulted. I mean, there are people in that bunch who probably deserve some prison time, and there's probably some who are just along with the crowd and probably I don't think necessarily deserve prison time. The bigger problem, and if you're looking at the rating here, is like, yeah, on a damage and violence scale, I kind of agree with Chuck. It's below a 5. On the impact on danger to the country. So I'm from Canada, so this is an outside view. This is a much higher. This is like a 7 or 8 and it's because not necessarily because of a group of people or even Trump, but how many people in power are just going, yeah, this is totally the right thing to do. And I kind of feel bad for the people who were there, because if the election was really, really stolen, if there was some actual massive conspiracy where the electoral process was actually stolen, an insurrection against, it's justified. If the powers that be actually rigged the whole thing to steal the election away from Trump, the biggest sin of most of these people is gullibility, that they chose the wrong person to believe. And the people who really need the heavy prison time are the ones who, Giuliani, the lawyers, the Trump, the people who actually set this thing in motion. They're the ones who really need to do the time for this, because they're the ones who tried to stop. And, probably everything would have eventually worked itself out. But from what I hear, there is no constitutional understanding of what to do if that process was delayed for a day or a week. What would they do next? We don't know. It's fresh water, right?
To quote the podcast Chapo Trap House, for the longest time, the Republican Party was at the top. You had these upper crust elite intellectuals, who mostly relied upon a base of just complete rubes. And during the Trump era, the rubes took control of the party and just threw the elites out. Like the dumbest fucking people imaginable just surged to the top of the GOP. And
And
you can't really blame anyone except the Republican intellectuals who spent years intentionally courting these people and conditioning them to be like this.
and I think to both, I mean, both sides has some blame in the fact that they have been pushing each other that, oh, you can't trust them at all. You know, they don't have anything worthwhile saying. They are a danger to America. It's.
No, I
think the
think the bigger
Democrats have
issue
this.
is that with the
And
GOP, it's not just don't trust them, but the GOP has sort of trained its audience to exist in an echo chamber where mainstream
is that
media can't be trusted, where
is it,
scientists
yeah,
can't be
no,
trusted.
oh yeah,
But that's not
but
entirely unfounded. I mean, some
how
of that
many
has. I mean, there's reasons why, right? Look at how the media has covered the Claudia Gay stuff, right? I mean,
The media, wait, the media has a little bit of a left-wing bias. Sure,
okay,
it does.
okay,
But I think part of that has honestly been heightened because for like the past 30 years, the GOP has just relentlessly attacked the media to where you've probably sort of conditioned the media to be a bit more biased against you.
If somebody calls you accountable, you don't get excused if you develop a taste for human flesh. No, I think you have it backwards, Matthew. The mainstream media is quite biased. I'm talking about the legacy media in particular. They are shit. Uh, I can, as someone who has been in the media for 40 years now, I can tell you that what has happened in the last generation has been the most egregious shift of a major profession, that is to say, amongst professionals, that I've ever seen. It has gone completely 180. Just as recently as 25 years ago, the Radio Television News Directors Association of America, which I was a member, still looked at the Associated Press as the gold standard for unbiased journalism. In just the past 3 weeks, I can give you 10 examples of the Associated Press, again, the gold standard, being horrifyingly biased. This is to say nothing of the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, etc. When you say that that they've tried, the Republicans have tried to make the mass media an enemy, if the media wants to find out the person responsible for that, they are as close as the nearest mirror. The mainstream media is shit, and they deserve every bit of scorn that both sides give to them. Democrats give them crap too. Don't see why, but they do. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, but distrust in the mainstream media is absolutely called for. Simple.
Well, it kind of sounded like in some ways you were agreeing with me that, it's a more recent thing.
Last generation, 20, 25 years, I think, is sort of it. I mean, there was a lean before. I mean, used to be the evening news, whomever you watched, they covered a story in the Senate by playing a vicious soundbite from Ted Kennedy, who called Republicans terrible things, and that was the only soundbite they played. That kind of thing. That was sort of the norm, but in the last generation, it's just become so obvious. And boy, the thing that I hate the most is that these shitheads in journalism right now will swear up and down that they are absolutely unbiased, neutral arbiters, callers of balls and strikes. God damn, I hate when somebody treats me as though I am stupid. That is an insult. And yes, your other stuff is fine, but when you talk about the mainstream media not being trusted, boy, howdy, how in the hell could you possibly trust them after the duplicitous and mendacious nature that they've demonstrated over the past generation? Maybe I'm a little too close to it because I am a journalist and I've seen how the
Chuck,
sausage is made.
Chuck,
Boy.
obviously I agree with you a lot with a lot of that. I think you hate the media a little bit more than I do, which is fair. I don't have a problem with that at all. Besides that, so the Claudia Gay stuff to me really stands out. And that, you know, I posted that thing the other day.
Right.
Oh,
You had-
really quickly, I
Yeah.
think apropos to what Chuck said, when I was in school a few years back, a black guy told me his most awkward experience was he was in journalism class and the white teacher was like, the point of news is to make everyone feel inclusive and welcome. And then he said, and the teacher just stared at me and smiled. I've never felt more awkward.
Yeah, I mean, that's fucking pandering. What are you doing? Treating him like he is some delicate little flower. Oh my God. That's the
Right.
worst part. It's again, just another life experience. Someone who's been a assistant high school football coach for 35 years, and predominantly 80 to 90% of the players are African American. The last thing that they want is to be treated special.
Yeah.
They want to be challenged, just like everybody else. Just like I want to be challenged. I want to be the best version of myself. I don't want to have someone condescending over me saying we're going to change the rules to make Chucky more comfortable. Fuck that. No, sir, don't you dare change a thing for me. Give me your highest, most rigorous standards. That's what I want. And yeah, the soft bigotry of low expectation is what Daniel Monahan called it.
Speaking of Claudia Gay, besides that story, Chuck, what other things in stories in the media that stand out to you that you feel like really are just egregious examples of their bias and their
The two that really have stuck out to me over the years were along similar lines. The Duke lacrosse case, which again, I was news director of 3 Southside stations, Southside Virginia stations, but we were right on the North Carolina border, so we were we got Virginia AP and North Carolina AP, and so the lacrosse story was obviously huge. And Durham is less than an hour away from but 2 of our stations. So yeah, that was a humongous story. And because I didn't have a physical bureau in Durham, I had to rely on stringers to get information there. But the 2 papers down there, the News and Observer of Raleigh and the Herald Sun of Durham, it was almost as though they were having a competition to see who could come up with the most race baiting angle of that story. I mean, they just one upped each other each day until they got to the point where the News and Observer actually sent not 1, not 2, but 3 reporters up to, I think it was Porterfield, New Jersey, where 2 of the 3 accused lived. And their only point to go up there was to snap pictures of the houses. It's a very affluent suburb of Philadelphia, I believe.
Poor people don't play lacrosse.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a a local, but
Yeah.
but the whole story was about how 2 of the 3 accused come from Portersfield, New Jersey. Don't have the town right. And look at this: the average home in Portersfield goes for $650,000. What is the point of doing that if not to just stoke up this class resentment and piling on the trope, the clear white hat, the clear black hat, the clear good guy, the clear bad guy, like they were writing a fucking book. And if you look at it, that Rolling Stone article years later on the rape at the UVA campus almost followed the same exact, again,
Mattress Girl.
clearly defined good guys and bad guys saying the stereotypical right and wrong things. Was almost too good to be true. You know why? Because it wasn't fucking true. It was simply an attempt to use journalism as a means to advance a narrative. And the Kavanaugh case played upon the same tropes that the Duke lacrosse case did. Because he was a white frat boy from this culture, because he was from this culture, he was guilty. And the
Well, I think
media
my issue with Kavanaugh though is going to be When like Kavanaugh is, saying he doesn't know what a devil's triangle is or stuff like that, that's all through his yearbook while he's trying to make a case for his honesty. It's like, come on.
But even if he is lying about stuff like that, that doesn't make him,
Okay, but here's what I'm saying. When you're like defending your honesty and integrity while lying to me, so something I know you're lying to me about, you can say, well, he's being honest about the rape stuff. It's like, well, he's lying to me while he's trying to tell me he's not a rapist. You understand where I might pause.
Has that been proven to be a lie?
That's unfair.
Do we know that he knew what Devil's Triangle was and all that? I
mean, nobody knew what boofing meant.
That was such.
It's like all these things, all these sexually explicit things throughout his yearbook, and he knows what none of them mean.
You don't know.
Biggest problem with
it raises some red flags for me. It raises some red flags for me.
Simply because you don't like his answers. I
have to sometimes gauge your answers and make educated guesses if someone's lying to me.
All right. Well, the media abandoned all journalistic.
Here's the biggest problem
reporting the stories that came up about him, each more outlandish than the one before, till we finally got to the point where some fucker in Rhode Island claimed that he was raped by a boat, and the media ran with it before they had done anything. So they took journalistic discipline, which is an absolute precious part of the journalism process, and flushed it down the toilet. That journalistic discipline is what.
I think Daryl wanted to say something.
Yeah, Daryl wanted to say something. What do you want to say about
it? Maybe we shouldn't get off on whether Kavanaugh should have been a justice, and because the point was really journalism. So I'll refer back. Let's not go too far off the beaten path here.
I'm with you.
I mean, I not to jump on it too much, but I think you're both right. I mean, I think the media did a really poor job of covering it. And I also think Kavanaugh did a bad job of presenting himself for various reasons. I don't think that stuff was the worst stuff he did. I think he got really angry at one point. I wasn't particularly fond of that. I think that you can reasonably criticize him while also acknowledging that the way that the media covered the stories, they wanted him to not be. Right.
I can agree with that.
Yeah. So that would be the only thing I said to that. But I think Daryl has a great point. We shouldn't get too sidetracked. So actually, Daryl, 1 to 10, how bad? Oh, you said 7 or 8, right? 7 or 8.
Well, yeah.
On the political ramifications.
On the political ramifications going forward, the fact that if you don't support the narrative that January 6th was okay and Trump didn't do anything wrong, did they censor? They're censoring people. Didn't they censor for I can't remember her name, who did the investigation.
What do you mean censoring?
Cheney.
Cheney.
Didn't they censure?
Oh,
didn't they censure?
Censure.
Yeah. Censure. Okay.
Censure. Not censor, but censure. I mean, that is the dangerous part.
Gotcha. I get what you're saying.
Cheney, yeah.
Yeah.
The dangerous part here is not so much that there was this attack that didn't really cause that much damage, but that it's everyone in political wise is, if you aren't in lockstep with the fact that, this was just an everyday event, and it was actually the Democrats who planned the whole thing, then you're at risk of being ostracized. And that's the very dangerous thing, because Trump could very well be president. And what is he going to do when there were some Pence stood up. There were some Republicans who stood up and manned up or womaned up and did the right thing. And what would have happened if Pence didn't sign off? And what happens when he makes sure that he gets rid of the people if he gets in power and gets rid of the people who are going to be the checks and balances. Because
I think the
mean,
scariest consideration is that
I wouldn't want 100 Democrats in the Senate. I wouldn't want 100 Republicans in the Senate. I wouldn't want everybody who's doing the checks and balances run by any party. I mean, there's 6 members of SCOTUS who are conservatives. I certainly wouldn't want to see 9 any more than I'd want to see 9 Democrats judges. You're going to get bad decisions. One of the politicians in Canada in the Green Party talked about the gift of opposition, and the purpose of being in opposition is not to just be against everything that people are in power in. It's not to score points. It's to point out, here are the problems with what you're doing, and we need to discuss those things and honestly discuss them. And you need checks and balances. You need opposing ideas. When everyone's in the echo chamber, bad things happen. Stupid things. People should be able to stand up to the president and say, this is wrong, or any other politician and say, no, this is wrong.
My dad used to say,
it's wrong.
My dad used to say, if 2 people agree all the time, one of them is unnecessary. And I've always
I
like
that. That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
I every time I think about this, I try to find, and it's just the way my brain is, what the origin of the problem is. Like, is the problem, like, what is the chicken and the egg sort of situation? Is the problem the politicians, or is the problem us? And I think the problem in the United States is not the politicians, it's Americans. And we're the ones,
Americans.
They're mirroring us, right? The fact that we know what we know about Donald Trump, and he's, in my opinion, is the strongest candidate right now to be the president of the United States, based on my personal subjective interpretation of polling and all of that. I think he's in a strong position. The fact that that is going to happen after everything he's done, and the fact that we know who he is, says something about our country. I mean, he is a fucking nut job.
Wait, I'm gonna have to push back on that a bit, though. Would you say that the problem with Nazi Germany had nothing to do with Hitler? It was just the German people? Do you not think politicians mold their constituents to some degree?
Yeah, I think it probably is a process that feeds itself. However, the hardcore MAGA base, there isn't enough of them, and they're not situated electorally in a way that could elect Donald Trump. They need significant support from other people in the country who aren't like that, right? And so the fact that you have tens of millions of people who would say Trump is preferable to a piece of dog shit, to me, is astounding. Just, and it's not even based on, I can deal with the fact that people are kind of indoctrinated to believe all sorts of stuff. Like, I can deal with that. But Trump tells you who he is every fucking time he talks. Like, you don't need to be a psychic or super intuitive or brilliant or knowledgeable or anything. You can see him for who he is. And a large portion of our country is like, yeah, I want to elect that dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, all I can say. And then on the other side of that, just one more thing, not to jump on Republicans or right-wing people, there's a left wing in this country, an emerging population of crazy people that I feel like has gotten bigger. And I think that it's supported by certain studies that have been done, but that are just as toxic and to our country as the Republicans or the right wing. And I didn't
I mean,
think that I didn't
if they
think
launch a
would be-
siege on the Capitol, I might agree with you more there. I think you're doing a little bit too both sidesy right now.
Well, I would say that you're correct until Palestine and Israel happened. And I watched one of the biggest, sort of most supported groups on the left essentially support, and never mind all of the prominent academic institutions, support Hamas, who just basically engaged in a genocide, or an attempted one, right, of the Israeli people. And they would,
Okay, but I think it's easier for Americans to have dumb ideas on foreign policy where things don't directly affect them.
well, I don't know what that means, but people were
I
raped in
mean,
mass
none of
murder.
us are really personally affected by Israel versus Palestine. So, people here will have very distorted opinions on the issue.
But I'm not
Um,
personally affected by people ransacking the Capitol building. I mean, it doesn't affect me in any.
Here,
I
There's-
think that probably has a lot of a closer hit to home for most people
The-
than Hamas massacring Israelis. Sorry, Daryl, did you want to speak?
Yeah, buddy.
the left is less likely to, well, I don't know if the left is less likely to come to violence, because the left, Black Lives Matter was largely left. But I mean, you're talking about, was it Claudia Gay?
I mentioned that before. Yeah.
Yeah, three heads of 3 universities were asked a very simple question: Is it against the policy? Is it against the bullying policy to call for genocide of an entire nation's people? And not one of them could give a very simple. No one asked. The question is from the river to the sea a genocidal claim? Which some might say, well, some people don't think that. It wasn't that question. The question was, is it against policy to call for genocide? I mean, if you mispronounce someone, and I'm very pro-trans, that is considered a hate issue on campus.
Do you know what the
calling
worst
for
part
genocide? I mean, no, you didn't
yeah.
get, you didn't disqualify because you're black, because the white person did too. You just couldn't answer the most basic civil question asked of you.
But the
correctly.
worst part of
Well,
that,
you see, the calculus going through their head is, well, the Muslims are brown and they're yelling it. And a lot of the Israelis are actually kind of whitish. I mean, the Ashkenazi Jews, not the brownest of people, and they're wealthier, they're better off. Even in America, they're probably doing better. There's all this Islamophobia. All these little calculus equations are going through their head.
But these are nutty ideas on the left. These are nutty ideas on the left. If you can't answer,
they are.
Genocide is wrong. That is no different than saying white supremacy is wrong.
Right. So why? So to me, that is an indication that something is seriously fucked up on the left. And the fact, and I get the impulse, Matt, to be like, well, hold on. But that scenario, watching them and watching the protests and watching these presidents of universities not be able to call out genocide, and the worst part of it is, if that had been any other group in the entire world, if it had been a country in Africa, if it had been a country in South America, if it had been anybody, those students calling for the river to the sea, whether they knew what it meant or not, would have been immediately dealt with. There wouldn't have been any conversation. It would have been an easy as pie. And in this situation, now everything's ambiguous, right? Like, well,
what if it was Muslim students standing up against trans people? There's where.
We already know because remember the Pulse nightclub shooting, where the shooter, when he called police, swore allegiance to ISIS. The intersectionality score of the Muslim went over the gay people there, and the Muslims won that little battle because The gay people were now told that no, this was not a gay-phobic attack. It was, it was gay-phobic.
Wait, though, I will
not
say the FBI's reasons for not classifying it as a hate crime is they listened to what witnesses said that he said to like the bouncer. He's like,
Where
"Oh,
all the girls,
where,
yeah.
yeah, where are all the girls at?" And
Did
they're
you know
like,
he was
"Okay,
in a
he
gay
actually
bar?
didn't seem to know that he was even at a gay nightclub to begin with.
He was just
He
gonna
was
go."
just like nightclub."
Well, and again, I mean, if we're going to talk full circle here, media malfeasance, their reporting on the Pulse nightclub was horrid as well. I mean, everything that the media ran with in terms of a narrative was absolutely refuted in the subsequent court cases.
Sure, but I'm not gonna lie. I assumed. Look, someone swears allegiance to ISIS and shoots up a gay club. I assume it's because they're gay.
I'm gonna take them at their word. Exactly. I mean, I'm with you. I understand that, but it was almost comical because Obama and others afterwards said now the motive remains elusive. No, he pretty much told you why he did it. Why do we not believe him? It's like a Monty Python sketch. I did it because of Allah. No, you didn't. No, that's just the Islamophobia talking. No, come on now. it was funny.
Right. So yeah.
And just a word about the incredible testimony that we heard from the presidents of three of our more august institutions in Congress on December 7th, I believe it was. No, we should not be surprised because that is, in terms of what the goals of modern progressive thought is, theirs is a binary world. You are either an oppressor or you are oppressed. There's no in between. You are either one or the other. And Matthew was right. The intersectional scores were tallied, and the Palestinians had a few more points than the Jews.
Which is weird.
Therefore,
The Jews are like the most oppressed group in human history.
yeah, but now they're doing
At
okay.
one point, yes.
They look kind of white, don't
At
they?
various points. At
They look
various
kinda
points.
white. But I mean, but no, in terms of the intersectionality scorecard, it's all about the degrees of oppression. Again, there's no in between. And you're right. If they had asked her if genocide against gays would be a violation of their school policy, they would have said, hell yes. But they could not quite come to say that the calling for the genocide of Jews would have been not wrong or even a crime, but against school policy.
If like 10 students are wearing white robes screaming, "Go back to Africa."
Yeah.
Does that violate the Harvard
I don't think they would have
standard of
equivocated that.
conduct?
That would have been pretty much a slam dunk. And the fact that they equivocated it, like some slimy lawyer, opened a lot of people's eyes. Now, Claudine Gay was nice enough to be a serial plagiarist in addition to being an anti-Semite, so that made things a little more
And
interesting.
they
In all
still call
fairness,
it racist.
I doubt she's an anti-Semite.
She might not be. I don't know.
I doubt it.
I mean, I don't. I mean,
Yeah,
but,
I don't
but
think what she said makes her an anti-Semite.
She
I don't-
took the party line
think
here.
that's-
Yeah, but yeah, she might.
She's just trying to be woke. Like, I
Right,
think
but
that was just it. She's just trying to be woke.
Well,
You
what
could
she's
be very
doing
right,
is
yeah.
enabling anti-Semitism. I mean,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
So
Yeah, she may
all
not
right.
have any particular burning hatred towards Jews. Yeah, you might be right there, but yeah, in terms of the intersectionality scorecard, the Jews must be the bad guys here because they don't have quite as many oppression points as the Palestinians. To me, the moral judgment as to who to support in this battle, God damn, I have never seen an easier choice than this. Do we choose with the liberal Western democracy, or do we go with the totalitarian barbaric pedophiles and necrophiles from Hamas? Good God, that's an easy choice. Shit. But
So here's all right.
Hey,
Here's a good
necrophilia
segue.
is a victimless crime.
yeah, among the living.
So let's talk about Israel and Palestine because we kind of went in like 17 different directions, but we ended up here somehow. Thank you, Claudia. So my feelings on Israel, I've talked about it a lot online. I think we all kind of agree that, I mean, here, that Israel is sort of Or at least I think we do. The justified party in this scenario. But there
Yeah.
are a growing group of leftist radicals. I don't know what else you would call them, right? Who are very much on the side of Palestine and have this sort
There's
of
a lot to sympathize with the Palestinians over. There is. Look, I wouldn't want to live in Gaza or West Bank. I wouldn't want to live under Hamas, although Hamas has quite a bit of support from the Palestinians.
which is annoying.
That's the thing. People have gone to great pains to try to separate the Palestinian people from Hamas, and I know why they want to do that, because Hamas is shit, obviously. But I'm not convinced that there's a major gulf. Let's just say Hamas doesn't seem to have a problem drawing a crowd when they parade half-dead bodies in the
Yes.
back of the Toyota pickup trucks. Those seem to be very well attended to me. So I don't think there's a great, I mean, there's some difference, obviously, but not as much as some would have you believe.
I've made people, there's this meme that gets shared of the two people. One side's like, we're not Netanyahu. The other side's like, we're not Hamas. I'm like, well, Netanyahu was elected into power. So obviously he represented Israel. He represented a pretty large fucking chunk of how Israel feels. Hamas was elected into power and they ceased elections and all of that, but Hamas enjoys a lot of fucking support from the Palestinians. We do have to judge both groups to some degree by their leaders, because
Didn't
they grew support from their base. Yes,
I
Daryl?
didn't I had heard, hadn't looked into it too much, but I had heard they had done some polling just before October 7th in Gaza and the West Bank, and Hamas was down like in the low 20s popularity wise. They had dropped off, and some people were talking about how Hamas almost had to do something just to, because the support was falling off. Now I don't know. I didn't look too much into that survey and how it was conducted. I mean, I feel bad for most of the people in Gaza and the West Bank for what they're going through. I think the international community has to keep an eye on Israel as it would any other nation at war. There are some bad actors on both sides who would be willing to take things farther than they need to, but they are in a unique position of where's a comparable warfare zone in the world where where the military bad actors are so deeply embedded with civilians. The question I keep asking people is, okay, well, you say this is bad, and I agree. I mean, I feel really bad for anyone there, but I don't think you can just say, well, there has to be zero fatalities. Well, how do you actually solve this issue is the question I keep asking. Is like, okay, how do you go into a place where people don't agree to wear uniforms, where they booby trap civilians, and a number of them are quite willing to martyr themselves or martyr any civilian next to them, because they're all going to paradise. I mean,
Hamas
not
is essentially-
every, obviously not.
Hamas
This is
literally.
sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, please, this is not all Muslims. I just wanted to get that out there. But there are a significant number at least in that area, where they're quite willing to die and go to paradise to kill as many Jews as they can. Go ahead. I just want to make sure I got that point out. I don't want to come across as
No,
against.
you're fine.
Islam.
Hamas, also has a martyrdom fund. Now it's not just for people who blow themselves up in attacks. It does also support families of people who are killed by Israeli airstrikes and whatnot. But still, a very significant portion of that fund goes towards the families of people who carried out jihad. And I'm just going to point out, when we say that area, it seems like we're talking about the whole Middle East. not just Israel that has an issue with Islamic terrorism.
And that's the thing. I mean, Hamas's very foundational charter is built around the extermination of the state of Israel. How do you negotiate with someone whose very existence is tied to your non-existence? You don't negotiate with that. There's no way you can negotiate with someone who denies your right to exist. So once we start from that standpoint, you quickly realize that any attempt at reconciliation is doomed, so long as that group, in this case Hamas, denies your right to exist. I mean, you don't negotiate with that. You
Yeah,
don't coexist with that.
I'd go a little bit further with that. I mean, there's that coupled with the fact that 10/7 happened. Like, imagine being in a country that's as close to you as a neighboring state, or in your case, a territory, Daryl, or whatever you Canadians call it. Provinces. Yeah.
And
You have
provinces and territories.
and territory.
I mean, does anyone remember the kerfluffle over when the UN, because the UN helps fund a lot of Gaza's education, they wanted to include the Holocaust as part of history education? And Hamas is just like, this is a lie perpetuated by Zionists to steal our land. And then the UN Human Rights Council, I believe it was, had to take a step back and they're like, no, we're not forcing people to learn about the Holocaust. It's like, and then, it's the same Human Rights Council that winds up always voting against Israel. It's like, oh.
It took them 2 months to pass a resolution declaring that the Hamas.
Did they finally pass it?
Yeah.
No, I didn't hear they finally passed it. Okay.
I haven't heard that either, but I'll take your
Oh, I
word.
don't know if they actually
word for
passed it, but they made a declaration of some kind. Maybe officially it didn't get
I'm
passed.
sure it was very thinly worded, quite frankly, coming from the UN. Yeah.
But comparatively, I mean, they've passed how many resolutions against Israel? Like
Yeah.
9 gazillion. I mean, clearly they're biased against Israel. Clearly. So anyway, but imagine living in a state, territory, locale as close to you as Israel is to Palestine, where you've just had one of the most worst massacres I've ever heard of, right? Where they come in and they rape and murder people, children, babies, in the worst, most imaginable, horrific ways, right? And then what exactly is your alternative, right? They have no alternative. They have to eliminate Hamas. They have to. And the only way to do that is militarily, because Hamas isn't saying they're going to, they're going to stop being in power, right? So they have to do it. They have no other choice. So I understand it's obviously tragic that this many civilians are dying. I think it's horrible, right? But that doesn't make Israel equivalent to Hamas in this scenario. That makes Hamas even worse, in my opinion, because they know what they're doing. They know that that going there and doing that would create this. They knew what they were doing, right? And they know that they're using these people because it's like a really condensed area population-wise, right? There's a huge population of people relative to the amount of land that's there. Right. So they know people are going to die. They put themselves in hospitals. They use them as bases. They hide, underneath civilian territories. And it's like.
And when the IDF tells people to leave because there's going to be an airstrike, Hamas tells their citizens to stay.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. They're using them as human shields. Like, think about that for a second. Think about what it takes. Like, imagine the United States did that, or Israel did that, or any other country did that. I mean, it's like the most evil thing imaginable. Mm-hmm. And
because both sides aren't just playing like military wars, but they're playing propaganda wars.
Well, that's true in any war, though. I mean, that's true anytime.
But I think that in this type of war, that's especially true. In Russia, Ukraine, there's obviously propaganda on both sides, but that is a more military war. The dispute between Hamas and Israel is one in which both sides are trying to just propagandize the fuck out of everything on the world stage. What happens to their populations is actually more incidental.
Well, I don't see that from Israel's side. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
when like Israel tries pushing things like any questioning of Israel's right to exist is anti-Semitism. When Israel floods, American politicians with large donations through groups like AIPAC, what they're doing is they're effectively spreading their influence and their propaganda.
But isn't it sort of anti-Semitic to say that an entire country can't exist? I mean, do you know that after World War II, there was something like 53 countries Arabic countries, Muslim countries, that exiled something like 750 to 900,000 Jews? Where were they supposed to go? They were almost massacred, right? So we get one country. You have however many Christian countries, you have all of these Muslim countries, right? 50, 100, whatever it is, right? You have zero Jewish countries.
I believe the counter argument from a lot of these people is going to be, and this is where I understand where they're coming from, but I think it's too idealistic when they say, well, those countries shouldn't have done that. And it's like, well, they kind of did though.
But they did.
So, and they're kind of going to keep doing it. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, but here's the other part. Countries are created all the time.
I think in the modern day, that's a lot less common.
I don't know if it is.
Well, there's a country carved out just 2 years ago, South Sudan. It happens. I mean,
it happens, but you want to go like 1,000 years ago where countries are breaking up, borders are constantly being redefined every time one person sieges another.
Well, what do you think
the map of Europe has changed in my life. The map of Europe has changed substantially 4 times in just my lifetime. I'm 56. Yeah, that's not a.
It's really not that crazy.
It happened a lot more a few hundred years ago. I think in the modern era, it's becoming less frequent. But we can agree to disagree and move on, though.
Okay, maybe that's true. Maybe it's vastly more frequent 100 or 200 or 2,000 years ago. I don't know. But you don't see this level of animosity towards any other group except for Jewish people.
Well, the Arabs also kind of feel that way about the Iranians.
There is not nearly the animosity towards the Iranians that there is towards Jewish people. Maybe
in the Middle East. Wait. You're gonna find Iranians are not very popular.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you look at, the worst gets, Iran and other inter-Arab wars. When's the last time you saw 100,000?
That's their issue.
They're Persian. Right.
Yeah, that's Sunni and Shia, old.
Okay, but
Shiism comes into it too, but the Iranians are invaders that conquered the territory.
Go ahead, Daryl. Go ahead.
But when do you see 100,000 people around the world protesting any of those battles and calling for the extinction of them? I mean, inside the countries, yeah, there's some animosity back and forth. This is around the world, Muslims around the world uniting against the common enemy, many of them. A
lot of the Muslim resentment is anti-Semitic. Yes. A lot of that, yes. What do
you think the American left academic sort of stuff?
I think it's a Russian Olympics.
Okay. You don't think that any of that is motivated by anti-Semitism?
I mean, when you say any, yeah, obviously,
but a meaningful portion. Meaningful portion.
No, I don't think meaningful portion motivated by anti-Semitism.
Okay. You think it's much
It's-
more
Well, I don't
the outcome is
I don't
anti-Semitic.
the outcome?
The outcome is anti-Semitic, but I think you're right. It's not. It's more about
sure.
oppressor, oppressed than it has anything to do with.
Yeah, and the
with
Palestinians have it's not a comfortable existence. I get that. No, that feels like I'm underselling it. The Palestinians very rightfully do feel constantly under attack. They do feel constantly in danger. A lot of them in the West Bank or Gaza. That's not again, but I also feel like a lot of the Arab countries have spent 80-ish years encouraging them to just keep fighting, like things will get better for you. And, the Israelis have been gassing up their people the same way. The major difference is the Israelis are right. The more they fight, things do get better for their position. The more the Palestinians fight, the worse things get for them.
Are you guys aware that the humanitarian aid that's been flowing into Palestine for however long has been taken by Hamas, and
Oh yeah.
they've utilized it to enrich their leadership and buy themselves military
I
stuff?
had some figures several years ago on what oh gosh, who was the I can't think of the guy's name, but he was the head of Hamas up until a few years ago. How he had diverted something on the order of $6.5 million worth of aid that he turned into he purchased a private Mahmoud Abbas. He purchased a private jet, refurbished his palace, things like that. And I mean, just yeah, everything that goes through there goes through the military. I mean, they have literally taken water pipes and melted them down to make
Yes. The EU donated the water pipes, and you can watch the videos of them ripping them up to turn them into rockets.
Yeah. So
And it probably didn't help that Netanyahu actually encouraged a bunch of aid into Gaza because he wanted to keep Hamas powerful enough to be a nuisance, or at least there's accusations that was his motive. He wanted Hamas to be powerful enough to be a nuisance, and because that would stoke anti two-state.
I've heard the accusation before. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but I wouldn't entirely put it past Netanyahu.
I think it was I think that was Israeli papers reporting it. I could look them up again, but
I've seen the accusation from an Israeli paper.
Yeah, that's been kind of a trope that's been, of course, reintroduced in the last 3 months. Thanks to the violence that Netanyahu had actually propped up Hamas to keep them there as an enemy. And I understand for someone with as militant a background as Netanyahu has, it is politically advantageous. It's always advantageous to have an enemy politically because much like with people who support climate change, if the weather's sunny and 72 all the time, no one's paying attention. If you got wild weather, though, that's when they're paying attention. Everybody needs an enemy, a dragon to slay.
Isn't Netanyahu
get away from climate change, because I feel like we'll fight on that one. But I guess the better comparison might be like the way the Arab countries have spent 80 years propping their people up against Israel and the Jews. Because it's not exactly like the average person in the Middle East is living a great life, but they're all united against the great enemy.
Yeah, they've been taught well in that respect. Sorry for the rabbit hole I introduced there. I should not have.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
But no, yeah. I mean, nothing unites people better than a common enemy, and boy, howdy, we've seen nothing. If nothing else in the Middle East, we've seen the power of propaganda. Twitter has been an interesting place, and I say that put that in quotation marks. The past 3 months, the number of Palestinian independent journalist accounts that have cropped up and have gotten thousands and thousands of followers has just been bigger. Yeah, and
I see it all the time.
these guys make the Iraqi information minister look like an even-handed source of information. I have never seen such shameless, in-your-face propaganda. I mean, it is almost, you have to salute it. I mean, how do you post that with a straight face? But man, it is
Yes,
my
but
favorite ones were
also,
the ones after the hostages were released. Uh, they would look at them. They were so well treated. Look at them. There's good skin color and everything. I was just saying, my God, you've got to be shitting me. And there were a bunch of them. I mean, these people that, anyway, it's just been a fascinating thing. The word Hollywood has taken on, kind of a Palestinian Hollywood, because everything they present is a production. Everything is presented for the world to see, how terrible Israel is, how rough we have it.
I've
And
noticed that too.
yeah, it's been a propaganda war. But no, I just, again, in choosing who's wearing the white hats here, I mean, yeah, there's never such thing as a good guy who's completely good or a bad guy who's completely bad. But in terms of who has the moral right here, fucking Israel. You don't get to attack a country and then determine how they retaliate against you. If you walk up to me and slap me, you don't get to determine how I react to that. I get to make that determination, and I will.
Well, I think
And
the argument,
uh,
I think that the argument is that it's by the people on the left is that it's not a
disproportionate
purport,
is,
right? They're
oh,
saying it's disproportionate.
no, sir, I'm going to make goddamn sure that you're not able to do this ever again. I
That's
am
the argument that I
going to
feel like
insist
is
upon a disproportionate response.
right.
I insist upon a disproportionate response. At the same time, probably not going to stone you to death for slapping me. That, like, maybe a little bit too disproportionate.
But again, if you do
And
that to me, you don't get to determine how I react. That's all I'm saying. You don't get to determine that.
yeah, well, no, let's put this in perspective here. Let's say I slap you
Mhm.
and you kill me and my kid.
Mhm.
That is definitely a disproportionate response, right? Killing me because perhaps you felt like you had to stop me
Mhm.
is okay. Well, no, maybe I had to do. I couldn't just disable him. He was an imminent threat. I
Mhm.
had to take him out, but I also killed his kid too because I don't want this guy to breed.
Mhm.
So there is such thing as a disproportionate response. But what it gets back to, what the question I keep asking is, okay, well, how do you actually
What's the alternative?
do better than Israel is
Yeah.
in this particular, where they're so embedded? How do you do that? Because they seem to be trying to minimize casualties, but
They
it's a
they make
unique
the effort, yeah.
situation in warfare in the world, and I certainly don't have the military intelligence background to comment on it, other than looking at other things in the world. Okay, what else is like this? Where else have they encountered this type of integration of civilians and disregard for
Meld into the
the
populace.
rules
Well,
of war? I
that
mean,
was one thing we discovered in Vietnam, was that that separation between population and military target. Again, the enemy, such as it were, would meld into the population, and you couldn't tell who was who then. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough, but it's Hamas has made it
yeah.
really tough. Yeah.
So how do you do that? I mean, I don't
The
know
thing
I don't
is,
know if you can do better than what they're doing, and other than
yeah,
saying, okay, we're just going to ignore it.
right. Right. It's and one of the things is there's pressure on Israel to get this over with in a hurry, but because of the nature of this, because they are trying, making a good faith effort to minimize civilian casualties, by its nature, that's going to take longer. Now, that's going to take longer
Yeah,
because we're trying to minimize that. So you can't have it both. You can't have a quick operation, let's get out of here, uh, and still have minimum civilian casualties. You got to choose. It's a trade-off.
and Palestine still has hostages, don't they?
Yes, a couple dozen.
I think they still have hostages at this point, and Hamas turned down the recent offer of ceasefire
Mhm.
in exchange for hostages.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
They have
I,
8
I, I
American
don't know how to solve
hostages.
it. And to put things in perspective, I think I looked up. I think there's like 40,000 children who die of starvation every day, and there's been 20,000 casualties in
And we
what
don't even
essentially
know if that,
was
we don't
something
even know
brought,
if that number's
brought
accurate.
on themselves.
Yeah,
The
we have no
20,000
idea.
Yeah, but if you go with that number, essentially
Okay, so
self-inflicted.
for the accuracy
Nobody's
of
marching the
numbers,
streets demanding.
I
Well,
want to
but
say
if you go with that, 40,000
Israel's
today versus
estimates
20,000.
aren't that far off from the numbers Hamas reports. Like they're lower by
Okay,
like a
yeah.
few thousand, but they're not like saying, oh, only 500 people died or something.
But there's a difference between the civilian deaths and the deaths of Hamas, right? Isn't there a distinction there between what Israel is estimating and what's being given out by the
Militants,
ministry?
probably.
Yeah. Which I think is important when you're evaluating it, right, from a moral standpoint.
But if you look at the outrage, at 40, if people are this outraged over 20,000 deaths over a few months, why aren't hundreds of thousands of people marching the streets demanding that the rich feed the hungry? There's 40,000 kids a day dying of starvation.
Well, it's right.
If people
it's sanctimony.
If people are truly outraged about this because it's such a horrible thing, we should be, storming the castles, robbing the rich, feed the poor. No, nobody really cares that much. Why do they care about this?
Why is it that all the Hamas leadership lives out in mansions in Dubai? The PLO, the CIA estimate for the PLO's hedge fund is 2 to 5 billion. At least it was like 10 years ago. The PLO's finance minister's number was 3 billion. It's like, it's all this money. Why are you guys smuggling weapons in and not food?
Mm-hmm.
Great questions. Just to touch on Netanyahu, he's probably like one of the biggest failures in world history in terms of leadership, right? I mean, his whole thing was protecting the country, and they put him in power, and he didn't protect them. I mean, they invaded pretty easily and massacred just a bunch of civilians on a border that should have been protected.
Yeah, Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, has been, lionized as one of the best in the world.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, they clearly dropped the ball here. Now, of course, there's speculation that he let it happen so he would have an enemy.
I doubt that, though. I doubt he let that happen.
I doubt it too.
Yeah,
I had heard some talk of some people basically refusing to show up consistently. I think there was, I don't know, I haven't had enough time to research that, but people were tired of being used by Netanyahu on the border,
right,
and saying, well, it's Shabbat today, I'm not in.
Yeah.
So I think but I have to look more into that. Has anyone else heard anything about that? Where some members of the IDF just weren't showing up as a protest to Netanyahu, except they shouldn't have?
Let me tell you what I've done over the past week or so. For the first couple of months, I purposefully did not read very many of the firsthand accounts of those who survived the attacks of 10/7. But past couple of weeks, I've purposefully read a few of them just to know what I was going up against, basically, and it certainly has justified my initial general support of Israel in all this. The fact is, the attacks of 10/7 were. It was beyond brutal. It was almost subhuman. What happened to many people there, and it was done for the shock effect. Certainly, it was more than just they wanted to do more than just kill. They wanted to make a point, and I hope they made their point, because what I have heard puts them less than human in my eyes, and I can justify doing anything to someone who doesn't qualify as a human.
Let me ask you guys this question. When people make the moral equivalences, so during the massacre, there was a phone call recorded between one of the members of Hamas and his family. So he contacted his parents and his brother, and he called them and basically celebrating the murderer of all of these people, talking about how it was the greatest thing in the world and he had done all of this stuff and he was looking for congratulations from his parents, who honestly just seemed concerned about him. But imagine that same phone call being picked up against on one of the Israel soldiers, and the response that we would get from the same exact people that are sort of just ignoring it right now. Like that, to me, just that, right, shows that moral distinction pretty clearly. The fact that that isn't happening in the same way. You don't have videos of celebrations of Israel, soldiers dancing in the street and praising.
Unlike after 9/11.
Unlike, yeah. And so, I mean, people don't have the capacity for nuance. Just because civilians are dying, which is an absolutely tragic thing, does not make them morally equivalent. Just like the Japanese and Nazis weren't morally equivalent to the Allies in World War II, just because the Allies were killing way more civilians than are being killed now, astronomically more, and doing it indiscriminately and not giving a shit, and probably doing lots of immoral stuff.
Yeah, but some lefties will tell you that Dresden should not have been bombed.
And there's debates on the Nagasaki and Hiroshima too, and whatever. At the end of the day, we're a better world for not being ruled by the Nazi regime and Mussolini and fucking Japanese, right?
I agree.
But that's my point.
Obligatory Italian joke.
Okay. War is war, and it's brutal and horrific, and innocent people die, and we should try to minimize that as much as possible.
The one thing I will say, though, I feel as though you minimize this a bit. There are also IDF abuses. There are certainly, the IDF oftentimes does have, as well as Israel, I'm talking about the soldier level here, though, a disproportionate response. A rock gets thrown at them and they're opening fire on a crowd of people. There's never really any punishments towards the IDF soldiers.
Well,
there are certainly a lot of them who have probably said pretty similar things to what was recorded in that phone call. I don't want to just be like, it's just Hamas. War is hell, and I think it's hell on the psychologies of both sides. And
but here's the thing. There's a difference, because I heard the phone call, right, with an interpreter.
Yeah.
There's a difference between hearing it and hearing about sort of these ambiguous incidents that happens. Now, if there are widespread Israeli soldiers doing stuff like that all the time, and I'm just not aware of it, well, that's just as heinous, and I'm not going to say anything different, right, about their side. But I'm not saying anything.
There is certainly a difference in that Hamas condones it a lot more. Hamas pretty openly condones it.
That's what I mean. I mean, if you have individual incidents of soldiers doing stuff like that, that's horrific and should be addressed. But it's not celebrated and supported.
It's not standard operating procedure
overtly by the government, right? Yeah.
I mean, who's that Israeli minister?
I got you. I know who you're talking about. But the thing about that, but
he's probably pretty openly celebrating.
Well, maybe he does, and there are some extremists in the Israeli government. But the Israeli government, if you know anything about it, is massive, and it's
a parliamentary system.
I would say that everybody in Hamas is that one extreme guy in Israel. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the difference here. And to be honest with you, you could probably find people like that in the American government. I'm sure that Matt Gaetz and whoever that green lady is, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, those people are terrible. And if we use those incidents, those isolated incidents of them saying terrible stuff as representative of all of us, I mean, that'd be crazy. But Hamas.
I just like how Matt Gaetz, in the middle of that whole underage prostitution scandal, was the one Republican to call out the people shaming the Democrat for her nudes.
It's consistent.
Your supporter is Matt Gaetz.
Consistent. Yeah. No, that is funny. All right, one more question, then we'll get going because I gotta go to bed.
pussy.
As far as the upcoming election, now that we've had a little bit of time, Biden's, I guess, jump-started his campaign, although every time that guy talks, I'm going to fall asleep. I mean, I have.
He really
I'm
is Sleepy Joe.
That's true. I didn't even think about it. But I mean, obviously, I'm going to vote for him because for all his flaws, whatever they are, he's astronomically better than Trump. I don't. No one can make an argument any different. Chuck has his own libertarian values that he'll probably vote for a shoe or something rather than these other guys. And I respect that.
What if Trump gets kicked off the ballot?
What's that?
I mean, what if Trump gets kicked off the ballot? What if the Supreme Court actually says, no, Trump isn't qualified? I mean, if Trump gets kicked off the ballot,
well, they won't they wouldn't be able to kick him off the ballot. What they would say is that Colorado.
I still support Biden.
Right. So even if they ruled in Colorado's favor, that would just enable states to be able to do that. So
yeah, but if enough states do it, or if the Supreme Court just says, forget which states do it, this guy's guilty, he's disqualified.
There's no way
they're going to.
Yeah,
I mean, there is
they're
an unlikely thing where he could.
I don't even think they're making the case isn't even involving. So somebody would have to bring like another case.
No, that's a completely the legal argument in Colorado is very narrow in terms of this, and it doesn't call for any questioning of Trump's national status, because there is no national status. There's only 50 state statuses.
Right. I'm interested in reading that decision.
Not a national election; it's 50 state elections.
So
yeah, which is kind of a horrendous shit show.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too, but.
Anyway, if they decide in Colorado's favor, which they almost certainly will not, that'll just enable states to do it. And the only states that are going to do it are states, unless you get like I think Michigan already denied it. So if you did get something like that, I mean, the possibility that Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, something like that, I think it's bad business, to be honest.
I think it's a bad precedent to set, especially in the case of Maine, where all indications are it was one person that made that determination. That scares me.
That should not be allowed.
Yeah, boy, howdy. I'm not comfortable.
Well, I mean, wait, though. My issue is what I don't like is it's like 2 states out of 50 seems weird to me, because he's the major Republican nomination. Come on, he's the only other party besides Biden. But I actually do think that Trump probably warrants being, if anything, warrants the 14th Amendment being triggered. Trump probably does.
I agree with that. I think there's a constitutional. Go ahead,
Darren. States, it's not just two that made it.
There might be other states down the road that try to do this.
There already are.
Yeah,
it's quite a few.
There's more than 2.
I saw.
Like I said, Colorado was one thing, because that was a Colorado court ruling, so Colorado Supreme Court.
Right.
At the very least, that implies some deliberation, some thought, but in Maine, it was one fucking person, that the Secretary of State, that chose to do that. Now I know every state's a little different, and it should be like that. The
Secretary of State is a part of the executive branch, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have an executive branch.
Actually, in Maine, they're voted on. It's as I understand it, Maine's Secretary of State is sort of the equivalent to Attorney General here in Virginia, and so far as they are the chief solicitor, chief cop of a state, and that is an elected position in Maine.
Unilateral position by an obviously Democrat.
Exactly.
Secretary of State.
I'm not comfortable with that at all.
Interpreting her own version of the Constitution. To me, is just flagrant unconstitutional authoritarian. I mean, she
based it off of the Colorado decision and then put it on hold and said, "Let the SCOTUS decide."
Right.
I think it just gets another state.
But it's pending.
The way we do president. Well, the odd thing is the way we do presidential elections, in that it is very decentralized. Very decentralized. Not only do you have 50 different states, you have different precincts within, you get something like 4,198 different, precincts
Yeah.
that are considered, and you have poll observers at each of those precincts. Nick, you've probably seen the page and a half I wrote on this a while back. Just the amount of oversight that goes into one precinct's voting
I
total
did that. Yep.
and the determination of that. There's a Republican and a Democratic observer. There is the sentinel at each. There is the poll director. There are the other executives there. They have to send the totals to a central election district. It has to be sent by telephone and verbally certified. It has to be signed at the site. To have any national move to weigh one candidate over the other, you would have to have tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people involved on this fix. No, 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 no. Again, you can find bits of malfeasance here and there, I'm sure, but in terms of a concerted national effort to influence something as vast and as decentralized as a presidential election, it cannot be done without about 150,000 people being in on the fix.
I remember you writing that. That was persuasive. Let me ask you this, Chuck.
Mhm.
Do you feel like there's a constitutional question? Is there? I mean, there,
I don't,
in a
yeah,
lot
no,
of-
in terms of whether Trump participated in an insurrection,
Yeah.
to me, that's thin gruel. That 14th Amendment was, of course, again, I always like to try to figure out the
origin.
origin of it. And of course, the origin was post-Civil War. They did not want to have high-ranking Confederate officials become high-ranking U.S. officials, although it was wild in that Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy, immediately after the Civil War, he was reelected to his old Senate seat from Tennessee like nothing ever happened. And he,
Well,
Yeah,
I
that is
believe
crazy.
after the death of Lincoln, I forget who Lincoln's vice president was. Yeah,
Andrew
as
Johnson?
his kind of, I don't know if it was Andrew Johnson or not, but I know part of his way of wielding power was cutting backroom deals and getting all the former Confederates to come kiss his ass for him to let them get back into office.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, of course, he was almost drummed out of the presidency for that, and many other.
Yeah, he was literally only put in as vice president to kind of get people who might be a little bit sympathetic to the Confederacy to vote for him.
Right. And the 18th.
And then when Lincoln gets killed, well, who are you stuck with now?
Yep, here you are. But yeah, yeah, to me, if you're asking whether the 14th Amendment applies to Trump, I don't think so. Again, I have a very high threshold when it comes to using the Constitution. I mean, it's got to be clear.
I get what you're saying. It's an interesting textualist versus originalist, right?
Yeah,
Because
I'm
from a
an
textualist
originalist.
perspective, you can read into that, and you can make, I think, a persuasive argument that Trump did commit insurrection. If you take all of the facts and put them together, but if
Yeah.
you go from the originalist perspective, right?
Yeah,
and-
the originalist perspective that was designed to keep former Confederate high rankers out of government. That to
Yeah,
me,
but I think if you would have like asked Lincoln at the time, okay, so this guy loses an election, then he starts calling up every official he
Secretary of
can,
State in Georgia, yeah.
like everyone though, telling them find votes, telling them to stop counting votes when he's ahead. Okay, stop now, stop. It's like, do you think this person qualifies? I think Lincoln would be like, oh yeah, that guy can't hold office.
But
He
in fairness,
qualifies as
that's
a
not
dickhead, but I mean, as an insurrectionist or a traitor, I guess would be a more fitting term. I don't know. But to me, again, you err on the side of democracy, and that is to say, letting people decide. And when you don't let people decide that, that's a whole other issue. I mean, boy, Trump, for such a damn buffoon, he certainly has forced us to re-examine a lot of our core infrastructure of government. I mean, he has.
So much of it was based off of an honor system.
Yeah, exactly. It was gentlemen's agreements for a
And
lot of
then you
things.
kind of have the guy who has no honor
Yeah,
getting into power.
we didn't count on an honorless asshole being yeah, but yeah, there we are.
All right, so who's going to win the election, Biden or Trump?
I'm riding for Biden. I hope.
I can't. I think
You can't vote. So
I think Biden. I think Biden will
You
lose
can't.
if they pick anyone but Trump. Oh, no, I can't vote. No, I'm not saying who I vote. I'm just saying what I think the outcome will be.
Look,
Is
I'm in Texas. We need to see blue votes. You want to come down, cast an illegal ballot? I won't say anything.
boy,
if they pick anyone but Trump, I think Biden will lose. I think the Republicans' best bet is to pick anyone but Trump.
But they're not gonna. I mean,
they're not.
Now, will Trump necessarily lose against Biden? I think he might, because while a lot of people agree with Trump's policies, over anything Biden, then maybe they'll think to control him. I think Democrats will vote en masse if Trump is out. And I think Republicans, you're going to get the MAGA core. There's a whole lot of decent, moderate Republicans who are just going to go, Trump's just beyond the pale. And I'm not going to bring myself to vote for Biden, but I'm just not going to vote for president. So you see polls where Trump is winning on policy. Okay, yeah, I think that people believe in policy, right? But when it comes to putting your check marks behind Trump, there's a lot of decent Republicans out there who are going to go, I'm going to vote for all the senators and the Congress people. I'm going to vote Republican straight down that ticket, and I'm just going to leave that one box unticked. And elections are typically there's like a couple of percent that makes that election. And I mean, what was it? Miss Lake, who was it Arizona? I can't remember. I think it was Arizona, where she decided she didn't need any of the McCain Republicans to vote for her.
Yeah,
and now she's complaining fraud. Well, no.
The best thing about Trump is every time he endorses a candidate, they just lose, because Trump's only qualification is, are you willing to put your tongue all the way up his ass? That's the only thing Trump cares about.
That's it. He is all
She
about.
would have won that election if she just courted all the Republicans, but she said no. Those McCain Republicans we don't need those kind of treacherous,
And after she lost, she tried claiming it was rigged.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like, and I think Trump, Trump seems to be able to keep pulling himself out of things you just never. So I can never say never.
Yeah.
And you don't want people to tell people, oh, don't worry, you don't have to show up to polls because Trump's going to lose. Because he might pull it off, but I think if people actually start coming out to the polls, not enough Republicans are going to go. I don't know. I'm gonna stack the Congress and the Senate with Republicans, but I'm just not going to vote for Biden. I'm not going to vote for president.
Well, the way the U.S. electoral system works out, again, it's down to the swing states. It's Georgia, it's Pennsylvania, it's Michigan, it's Wisconsin, and those 4 states Trump won in 2016. Those 4 states he lost in 2020, and the total number of electoral votes from those states would have given him the presidency if he were able to still carry them in 2020. The question is, in 2024, has he made up a difference in those 4 states in particular, while keeping all the others more or less where they were? And I keep saying no, but the freaking polls in a couple of those states suggest that Trump has a fairly sizable lead right now over Biden.
Now, is that on policy or is that on personality? It's like,
Good question.
If we look at the policies, are they going, yeah, I like those policies because they're conservative policies, or is it, are you actually going to show up to the vote, the poll, and tick the box?
You make a great point.
You
make a great point, Daryl, in terms of November 5th, 2024, are people going to actually do that, though? Because that's where the rubber meets the road. That's harder to say. I will just say this, though. I think I'm going to be clinically depressed if, for the second consecutive cycle, it's Trump versus Biden. To me, that is an indictment of our entire political system, that this is the best we can do.
See, I think an advantage. I think it was an advantage to Trump that he wasn't in our faces for 4 years. So I feel like a lot of people have just kind of
Forgotten
separated
how
themselves.
awful he was. Yeah.
And so there's that factor. And the other factor is I feel like Biden just doesn't have the support he used to. Not that he was charismatic in 2020, but I just feel like he's been out there and people are seeing how old he is. I really feel like that's a huge issue.
It is.
And I just feel like what helped Biden was Trump was scaring the shit out of him and pissing him off. And like on an individual personal level. And so people came out in unprecedented numbers. But you got to remember, Trump still got 73 million votes, which is more than anybody else in history except for Biden. Right? So I think it's really interesting to kind of look at it from that perspective. So if Biden doesn't get nearly the turnout he got, everybody's as depressed as you are.
Yeah.
I can see Trump winning again, and I'm having a hard
I
time.
don't think
Biden's biggest advantage in the last election is that after Trump, he was just so fucking boring.
Right, people wanted that, but like I said, Trump has been on
And you
Twitter, he's
remember
on people's faces.
in the pandemic, I mean, he was able to effectively run a virtual campaign, with limited appearances, and quite frankly, he's lost a lot off his fastball. His age shows, certainly. I mean, you look at his speech in the 2012 Democratic National Convention versus
It's amazing.
the slur fest from yesterday.
The most depressing thing about our politics is just how fucking old our candidates are. Can we get some spry, young 60-year-olds running for president?
To get Mitch McConnell in the Senate freezes every so often. You have to reboot him. So yeah, it's fuck.
Well, Ron DeSantis is pretty young.
He is, yeah.
And where's his candidacy going?
But
No,
yeah,
but
I thought he would get more of a fight.
I would vote for Haley over Biden, and I would vote for Christie over Biden. And I
I'd
know
stab you in
I
both
think
eyes for saying that. Ugh.
it's quite disturbing that the GOP primaries, Christie is the only one willing to
you're right.
attack the leading opponent.
Well, I mean, what
Right?
happens to you if you attack Trump?
You go down.
What if they all got together? What if they all got together and agreed to attack Trump? So there wasn't a monopoly. Why didn't they say, "Look, this is our job"?
Yeah.
As running for, you're
How
supposed
does
to attack.
that get news coverage?
What's
How does
going to happen?
News coverage.
that happened in
They're gonna lose.
2015, and they all lost.
If nothing else,
You remember the SNL skit?
everyone
You
by
remember the
attacking
SNL
Trump
skit from
could actually
1980?
get points.
I'm sorry. Do you remember the SNL skit from 1988 during the Bush Dukakis election, where John Lovitz was playing Dukakis, and I think Dana Carvey, of course, is doing HW, and he just gave this long, droning answer as Bush, 1,000 points alike, da da da. Mr. Dukakis, do you have a rebuttal? I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. It's one of the greatest lines in comedy history. I feel like that with Trump. I feel like DeSantis and Haley and the others every so often I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. But
I think they're losing because they can't come out and attack him
and say you suck.
Why isn't everybody? Why isn't everybody in that room saying, "Look, there's a certain percent chance that if you put this guy on the ballot, he might be in the."
Because that sort of stuff strengthens.
Yeah, but then you're not going to be picked for vice president.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
But even if you don't, you say, look, you pick him, and what happens if he's not qualified? You don't have a second choice.
What happens if Trump's in jail? Does he still run?
Democrats are out to get us. They're out to get us. They're going to nail this guy. He's not going to make it. He's going to get on the ballot, and we're going to be totally screwed. You need to vote for one of us. It's just a safe move.
I just want to see what happens to the whole GOP election process if Trump goes to jail and still wants to run for president.
What happens to the what?
The whole GOP process if Trump goes to jail and is still demanding to run for president.
They'd have to make a determination as to whether or not that was okay. I think Trump will likely get charged with a felony, but not go to jail. But if he does go to jail, obviously that makes it a little bit more complex. But I think I'm not sure it's an answered question. I think it's an unanswered Supreme Court question if that does happen.
I think he said he can run from jail, from what I heard, but I think he's not going to get the votes. I think even more Republicans will go, okay, he's actually in jail. We just can't look like a joke.
That would be the only caveat that I would say. There could be something that happens to more saner Republicans if he actually does get charged with a felony.
And then Vivek surges in popularity among the GOP.
That fucking guy.
Yeah,
I think we lost Chuck.
we did.
Yep.
Mossad took him out.
There we go. Hang on. There we go. We lost you, buddy.
Don't know what happened there.
All
We
right.
should have
Well,
had representation from, I don't know, Edward Ronco would have made a great guest.
I can't have Edward Bronco for the reasons I was
He's
discussing before.
What
He's-
about Leanne Kirchner? I would love to hear from her.
I think you might bring your gun to that episode.
I don't know Leanne very well.
It's right. One of them's right up here. I always have one just a few feet away.
She's very pro-Palestine. Ed, I couldn't have Ed on this show because Ed would be, Ed's arguments would be fictitious. It would be like having a 5-year-old. He'd be telling me things that just simply we all know aren't true. Entertainment
It
value.
would have made it more entertaining.
Entertaining, yeah.
Ed's entertaining. Like, oh, I love reading Ed's posts. Like, holy fuck.
I don't ever know what he's talking about. I'm just like, I just can't stand it. I shouldn't say it. He's an okay person. I can't stand his political posts. Anyway,
Strikes me as he's probably an okay guy to have a beer with.
yeah,
Well,
but
most people on Facebook are probably okay guys to have a beer with.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that most people are fine in person.
I think so, yeah.
But you also got to understand, we don't know anybody, right? We don't know anything about their past. Like these people could be like awful human beings, right? You just don't know.
Clap.
You
We
don't
should have
know.
had Clap on.
Who?
Clap?
Oh my God, that he's like a 50-year-old
Chuck
crack
knows
addict.
Clap.
He's like a
I
50-year-old.
know you talk about it, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I think he's a smart guy. I think he has, interesting points to contribute when he is being serious, but he has like no control over himself. So
Yeah.
like every time you say something he doesn't like, he just does a laugh emoji and says something personal. And it's like, okay, well, this was a fun conversation. Go fuck
I feel personally attacked by this characterization.
Why? You think I'm mischaracterizing him?
I feel like
You
you
think
could
I'm-
probably describe me like this sometimes.
You're not anything like that. I think honestly, I think that people are way too harsh in terms of how they describe you. The reason
Who
people get
describes
so
me
pissed,
harshly?
but the reason people get so pissed off at you, in my opinion, is because you make really good arguments and you're just very calm about it, and you'll just keep going, and they can't.
Also,
beat you.
sometimes I will just troll them. Sometimes, like,
And then you'll like throw a little dig in there sometimes
Yeah.
too. And that
No,
drives me
not
nuts.
Matt.
But I
I mean, Chuck
honestly-
stalked me twice.
Yeah, I have a couple of times. Yeah, you got under my
Yeah.
skin. Oh, sure.
You're one of the
think
most
the first
effective
time-
trolls I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you.
You're good at
I
that.
think the first time I just kept responding to everything you said with "Okay, boomer." You
Yeah,
just kept
that's
going.
it, yeah.
I'm not even a fucking boomer. Blah blah blah. I'm just like, okay, boomer.
Fine, just
I
cut
think
it
the first time I met you, you had been masquerading as an admin,
Admin
in,
of master debaters.
in
You
Was
were
it-
like threatening to block me, and I was like, "Oh, well, I'm an admin of the group. I'll ban you." I wasn't an admin of the group, but this was like
had-
before the bad days showed up next to people's names and stuff.
That's right. Yeah, you
And
couldn't tell
You could
then.
just say, like, I'm an admin.
was it in that group or was it in the political
You're
mosh?
master debaters.
Was it?
Oh, that goes back a few years there.
That
yeah.
was when I first got on Facebook. I was so out of control.
Master Debaters was one of the first political groups, I believe, that I joined. It was a couple others, but None of them exist now, but
That group was okay. Were you ever in the original or Grumbine's political mosh pit?
no, I missed Grumbine. That was evidently the glory days, the salad
I'm
days.
friends with him on one of my accounts.
Yeah,
and I
he's
just
like
don't
a
ever.
legend.
I
Yeah,
just watch him from a distance.
yeah,
He's a strange fella.
yeah, yeah.
Look, I don't have anything against him personally. He kind of does this thing you'll see ideological devotees do. Like, you know how a feminist will, if you ever introduce any problem to them, they'll be like, the solution is to smash the patriarchy.
Mm.
Or someone like Cody Edwards, if you ever present any problem to Cody, every solution is going to be, well, the problem is states' rights and the government, and that's like the only frame he's able to view things through. Grumbine's kind of like that with MMT.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect description. Yeah, and there's a lot of people online. They bring everything back to their core issue.
Everything goes back to the pet cause. Yeah, somehow it like, it's all tied in. If you ask Ibram Kendi about whatever, well, it's white supremacy. Da da da. Of course,
Yeah.
price of yo-yos in China is white supremacy. So yeah, it's some boring.
Grumbine's effectively
like asking the feminist, okay, name one thing affecting women that's just women's fault. One thing. Give me one thing.
All right. I gotta go to bed. I know you guys are probably tired too. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys coming.
This was more fun than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
We're a giant circle jerk.
Daryl, it was
we even let it
having you on for a voice of sanity in a world.
Yeah, we needed the calm Canadian perspective here. Thank you.
Pleased to meet you, Daryl.
Thanks for coming, buddy.
I'll say
come again.
Chuck, the podcasts have actually humanized you more to me.
I'm so glad that there is a human being behind Bill the Butcher's avatar.
So, also, watching you and Clap fight was some of my all-time favorite debate moments.
I've never seen Clap on a podcast.
It's been a while since I've run into them. Been quite a while now that I think about it.
I haven't seen them fight on a podcast, but I've seen like
in the threads,
I come down to like Clap making death threats and Gloria. Love you, Clap. I know you're gonna watch this. Love you.
As much as he acts like he hates it, he watches every episode and he always comments.
He's got a comment to say. Yeah.
Well, he's a hate watcher. Love you, Clap.
It's rage watching.
He's a hater.
Yeah.
He's a hate watcher.
All right. I'll talk to you guys on Facebook. See you soon.
Pleased to meet you, Daryl. Bye.
Good to meet you, Daryl. Thank you.